Women's college basketball has reached its golden age. No one would have thought even 5 years ago that a women's college basketball Elite Eight game would pull a higher rating than the NBA Finals, and yet here we are. Over the last 2 to 3 years, women's college basketball has seen its highest popularity in years, mainly thanks to superstars like Caitlyn, Clark, and Angel Reese. But there's a lot more going on under the surface as to why women's basketball has caught the hearts of so many fans lately. We're about to get into that. Coming to you from the Vancouver, British Columbia Spit Studios, I am your host, Elijah Ford. I am so excited to be back here today to talk about women's college hoops, which is not a subject I thought I would cover on the show, especially this early, but we have to talk about this because I have spent the last 2 nights of my life watching and consuming this women's product, and I've got to be honest, guys, it's awesome right now. But why? Why out of the seemingly clear blue sky is America, Canada, the world fascinated with women's college basketball at this point? Well, as I mentioned in the first block, the introduction, if you will, a lot of it has to do with the superstars that are coming through the scene right now. In different sports, we've seen this before, like with Tiger and golf and Serena and tennis, and just there's certain athletes who transcend the sport they're playing and become mainstream superstars regardless of whatever activity they're taking part in and how popular it is. But basketball has always been a superstar-driven sport and will always be a superstar-driven sport because your best player has so much more impact on the game than pretty much any sport except for if you have a great quarterback in football. Because in the NBA, the best player has the ball in their hands. They play both sides of the court. And just overall, if you don't have one of those top tier players on your team, it feels like you're kind of dead in the water in terms of your chances to win. With that, superstars are going to drive ratings and general interest from the public. It's just connecting the dots from point A to point B. Superstars drive interest, interest drives ratings. It's how it's worked with basketball history since Bird and Magic saved the NBA in the early 80s. And we're at the point now where the casual fan doesn't even really have a favorite team anymore. You used to root for your hometown team in the NBA. Now you have favorite players who you just kind of follow around wherever they go. And I'm not judging, by the way. I kind of root for the NBA like this too, except I do have my team, the Raptors, Canadian over here. And then I have my players that I follow. I'm a big LeBron guy, I'm a big Luka guy. Anyways, women's college basketball is at such an interesting point in its history, maybe the highest peak it'll ever be at, because everything is lined up so perfectly for these superstars to prosper right now. Now, obviously, these superstars, it's a 1 in a billion chance that we get this crop of players coming through women's basketball at the same time. Paige Buekers, who's super underrated in kind of the Caitlyn Clark shadow, but she's been unbelievable. Angel Reese was great in that first half against Iowa before she hurt her ankle. And South Carolina is one of the best coached basketball teams I've seen all year, women's or men's. So obviously a lot of it has to do with the powers that be sending these unbelievably motivated, driven, charismatic players. But obviously, women's sports has never been more legitimate. I think what Serena, Sabrina, and dozens of other women have done to inspire a generation of athletes is no accident. I think that's a big reason why women are getting into sports more than they have at any point in history. And what do women do when they want to play a sport? Obviously, football is probably a bit too physical. They could play flag football, but that hasn't really popularized yet. So they go to the second biggest sport, which is basketball. So it's no coincidence, but there is an element of luck involved that we're getting this wave of female superstars into college basketball at the same time. And when the schools get these players, they're staying, which is what is making the women's game as popular as it is right now. Way more popular than the men's game. And I'm going to get into why in a second. But Caitlyn Clark is a senior. We've seen her at Iowa before. We know what she looks like in that jersey. She's recognizable. So is Angel Reese, who just declared for the WNBA draft. So is Paige Buekers. Technically, she had a medical red shirt and a COVID extension season, but technically she's a senior too. We have seen these ladies at their schools developing, slowly getting better, and we get emotionally attached to that because it's not just 1 year in college, because people only really watch college basketball for 1 month. If we're being totally honest, we don't have the whole season to get into a team and understand where all of their guys came from and where this freshman and who this guy's story is. We don't have time. We really only have a couple games to watch, but we've seen these ladies in March before. So we kind of know what to expect. We know that South Carolina is the best roster. We know that UConn probably plays the best offensive basketball as a team. We know that Iowa is the best player. We know these things because they're repeatable. We've seen them before, so we get attached to them. And it's not that men's college basketball doesn't have great players. The issue for men's college basketball right now is twofold, and they both have to do with the one and done movement. So first of all, as I just mentioned, we don't know any of the players in March Madness these days on the men's bracket. Magic and Bird in the 1979 national championship, we're going back a long way, but that is still the most watched championship game of all time at 35 million viewers. It's hard to even wrap my head around that a college basketball game would draw that rating in the early 80s, but it did. In that game, obviously the two superstars were not in their freshman years. Magic was in his second year in college. Bird was in his third. And so to see how firmly these NBA players going one and done in college has affected the ratings, you got 1979 obviously pulled 35 million, 1981 pulled 29, 82 pulled 30.6, and 1983 pulled 32.1 million. In between those 4 games, a freshman touched the floor a total of 4 times. And the last championship game to eclipse 30 million was 1994. And most of them this decade and the decade before have been in the 17 to $22 million range. In that 1994 championship game between Duke and Arkansas, the last one to hit over 30 million viewers, Duke was led by a senior superstar. Sound familiar? Caitlyn Clark, Grant Hill on Duke. He was unbelievable in college. And a junior forward. And Arkansas was led by mainly sophomores with a couple juniors and seniors sprinkled in. Not one freshman played a minute in that game. So it's an emotional thing, right? Like in sports, we get emotionally attached to our favorite teams, to our favorite players. In men's college basketball nowadays, we simply don't have the time to do that. The most recognizable player right now is Zach Edey. You know why? Because he's been at Purdue for 4 years now. We recognize him. We know what his game is. We know what his story is. We know he's had some rough performances in the tournament, but now he's coming back and he's probably going to pull the biggest rating in the men's Final Four this year. Maybe UConn will because they're so dominant, but as an individual, he would definitely pull the highest rating. But the second point is the one that I don't think enough people pay attention to, and it's the fact that these players don't have enough time to develop into great college players. Because obviously, it's way harder to put up big numbers as a freshman in college, which is all these NBA players are getting at this point. Magic averaged 17 as a freshman in college. Jordan, maybe the greatest basketball player ever, averaged 15 points as a freshman in college. Larry Bird didn't get to play. LeBron James and Kobe Bryant averaged 0 points as freshmen. The highest scorer in college basketball this year was Zach Edey, who I just mentioned. He was at 25 points per game. Like, that's really good, but it's not Caitlyn Clark and Paige Buekers averaging 30. It's not Angel Reese averaging a double-double pretty much when she gets out of bed. Like, these individual numbers are good, but they're not all time. They're not eye-popping like some other seniors in college basketball history have, like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or even a Christian Laettner. All of these guys who we know their stories and they're dominant, and we can see that they're dominant. These NBA players come in as freshmen, go one and done. They're probably about 40% of the college basketball player they could be, and that's all we get to see. So the game won't be as popular. Men have every reason to leave college basketball. It's not exactly men's college basketball's fault. Men can make a lot of money in the NBA. And if they don't, they go to the G League and still make a lot of money. Women, you come out of the college basketball machine that's giving you NIL deals at this point. Caitlyn Clark was just offered a $5 million big three contract, and Lord only knows the endorsements that she's gotten since she became popular. You're making about $50,000 on your rookie WNBA deal. Why would you come out of college? In college, you've got it all. You're the best player, big woman on campus. You're making more money than you would. They have every reason to stay, whereas men have every reason to leave. And you put all of that into a blender, all of those different factors. And of course, you add in the sprinkle on top of the once in a generation super duper trooper stars that are breaking into the WNBA at this point, and you get the explosion of a sport that's never been seen. And gosh, I'm so happy for women's college basketball. I'm so happy for women's sports, because what I really hope this does is it gets enough eyes to women's basketball where general fans start to realize that the quality of women's sport has gotten to the point where it's not only just watchable, it's dang entertaining. And they shouldn't be judged just based on their gender. They should be judged based on their skills on the court. And I think the skill in the sport is better than it's ever been. I think the best players are better than they've ever been. And I love it. And I hope it translates to bigger women's flag football interest and women's soccer and just equality in sports in general, because I think that's so important for the future of this business in general. Before I go, that's it on the women's college basketball, but I did want to touch on the Bills trading Stephon Diggs. Now, this happened about 2 hours before I started filming this, so I don't have a lot of research on it, but I do have some of the basics, and my wrapped in a present take is I am way more on leaning towards the Bills side of this trade than the general public. I'll tell you that right now. So the Bills actually lost $3 million in cap space by trading away Stephon Diggs. They're taking $30 million of dead money on. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because you can't make the excuse as Buffalo that, we were getting rid of a bit of an aging receiver. We wanted to hit the reset button on the offense, and we wanted to get more money, going for it. You can't say that. It was cheaper to keep him. So clearly they got rid of him for some reason, and I think I know that reason, and it's way more obvious than you might think. So from week 11 on, the Bills went into week 11 and they were below 500. They were looking like a long shot to make the playoffs. And they went on a 6-1 run to close out the year and squeak into the playoffs, where we all know what happened from there. They lost to Patrick Mahomes, whatever. In those 7 games, in the Bills' 6-1 run that launched them into playoffs success of some kind, they beat the Steelers. Good job. Diggs had 315 reception yards and 34 catches in 7 games. Not good. He didn't end off the season well. He wasn't playing well. In the 2 playoff games, he had 73 yards combined. He's also just a lot of drama. He's a lot of finger pointing. He's a lot of Twitter fingers. He's just a lot of noise that doesn't have to do with winning Super Bowls. So the Bills getting rid of him, it's okay. But I will say this. This Bills draft is the most important draft they've had ever. They need to hit on one of these wide receiver picks because they're going to take one, if not a couple of them. They got to hit on one of those wide receiver picks. I like what they have at tight end. I think Kincaid's a good player. I like Dawson Knox a lot as an all-around tight end, but you need some of the wide receivers. Curtis Samuel isn't enough. So they got to hit on one of those wide receiver picks, and I think they'll be in a decent spot about the same spot they've been in the last few years. Way overrated in the AFC, probably lose to the Bengals or the Chiefs or the Texans in the AFC. I like this trade for the Texans. I have questions about how good Diggs is nowadays, but with CJ whipping him the ball, Nico and Tank taking up some attention, Texans are a threat this year, and they play the Lions, which I'm not excited about. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching. It's so great to be back. I really think this episode went well. Let me know if you think it went well in the comments section below. I am small enough as to where I can read all of the comments, and I love doing that. So please let me know what you thought. And as always, I will see you in the next episode. Thanks again for watching. Peace out.